Namaste. Welcome to my podcast. All right. In my podcast with Ashish Dhar, we covered about how it feels to be a Hindu minority in India. Obviously, the podcast was about Kashmir and the Kashmiri Pandit experience. I'm grateful to Ashish for sharing his perspective, and I was glad that many of you liked the podcast. But I felt, in spite of us talking about the subject of Kashmiri Pandits, we left a lot of subjects pertaining to that issue out of the podcast. Also, I felt I wanted a female's perspective on the same subject. So I'm glad I could convince Dimple Kaul to do this podcast with me. Dimple, welcome to the podcast.
Namaste, Kushal. Thank you for having me on your podcast.
Thank you for agreeing to do this. So, Dimple, before we get on with the serious stuff, why don't you tell the listeners a bit about yourself?
Okay, well, I think of all the guests that you've called on your podcast, I am the most low profile person, and I'm a little surprised as to, you even asked me to be here. But nevertheless, I can just say that I am an Indian Kashmiri Hindu or a Kashmiri Pandit who's lived in various parts of India. I've had the privilege to experience and understand the unique Indic ties that bind us, say, from Kashmir to Kanyakumari and from Arunachal to Ahmedabad. If I were to describe myself, I would say that I consider myself as a learner, a writer, a life enthusiast. I write on various issues across genres, and I definitely believe that writing is my soul calling. In fact, my debut book, Soul Call of Love and More, has just been released to quite heartening and gratifying reviews. I'm currently working on multiple projects across genres and forms, and some of you might know that in addition to penning poems and prose on my blog, I write columns for some media portals such as First Post, Swarajya, Mindmakers, Op India, India Facts, News and Views, among few others. So that's just a little about me.
Okay, first of all, you're not low profile. Nobody's low profile or high profile. Second of all, you forgot to tell everyone about your website. What's your website's address?
Oh, yes. My website is www.dimplehere.com. So, dimplehere.com.
So, everybody, go and check her website out. Read her poems. They're nice. And if you don't, you suck.
Thank you, Kushal. That was quite a vote of confidence.
Yeah. So, now to the serious stuff. Okay. Dimple, what does Kashmir mean to you? And I want to connect it to the next question because it's the obvious corollary to that. How did Islam spread in Kashmir?
Wow. What does Kashmir mean to me? Well, I'm a Kashmiri Hindu, a Kashmiri Pandit, and whenever somebody asks me about Kashmir, all I remember or what comes to my mind immediately is nostalgia, fondness, resentment, a sense of loss, grief, some hope. What I experienced as a child, as a Kashmiri Hindu child, a Kashmiri Pandit, of course, that did deeply scar me. But, for a really long time, I wasn't even aware of what had happened to me in my psyche. So the way the entire thing was portrayed in the media while I was growing up, I was a preteen at that point of time, and how it was portrayed in the media for a really, really long time, I thought it was our fault. I never saw the perpetrators of such heinous crimes either being brought to the book or, shamed publicly in the rest of India. I never saw any other Indian or, Hindu raising a really huge hue and cry about what was happening or what had happened to fellow citizens. And I can't blame everybody because it was the nature of that period. Those were the days when you had still telephones, and those weren't rampant, and telegrams were the speedier means of communication. So that is the time. But I'm not sure how is it that so many people managed to remain ignorant of what was unfolding in Kashmir. You won't believe that even as late as 2015, Kushal, trust me, I met this well-educated colleague from the south of India who, of course, in his ignorance, you know, uh, I would have otherwise said that, he had the audacity to ask me that why I did not live in Kashmir. It was such lovely weather. I mean, I can't tell you, even when I realize and when I think about it, I still feel that numbness and shock. You know, when he said that, the first thing was like, how cruel are you? Is what kept into my mind. But then immediately I realized that, probably the rest of the countrymen also don't know what has been happening or what has happened. And he didn't realize at that time I was living in Mumbai. So it was like a Mumbai se Matheran picnic manane nahi nikle the yaar apan ki udhar each bas gaye types. So I realized that, Kashmiri Pandits, we are the insignificant vote bank, and we need to tell our own tale. Otherwise, nobody will damn care. And imagine, for example, what happened recently, as recent as yesterday. The Supreme Court has dismissed a petition about investigating the killings of Kashmiri Pandits. And I really don't know what was exactly written in the petition, who presented the case. So I'm not really sure what our lordships have actually witnessed. But what came in the news and was there all across social media, it was very disheartening, it was disappointing, and it left me personally with tears in my eyes and bile in my mouth. I mean, the petitioner was asked as to what were you doing sitting over it for 27 years. Imagine if judges of Supreme Court, they've managed to keep themselves so isolated from the goings on in the region. The gross human rights violation have happened. Islamist jihad has seen brutal terrorism, and where the state has been forced to deploy army to maintain a semblance of order. Now, what can I say? I mean, it was not some mere land grabbing or एक murder हो गया या किसी ने गैर कानूनी कब्जा कर दिया भाई मेरे plot of land पे. This is what we are talking about is basically minority Hindus being informed through newspapers and posters and those hateful loudspeakers about Raliv Galiv Zaliv. Jao,
Yeah, but
jao ya bhago.
here's my question. How did they become a minority? And
Yes,
like I said
yes,
previously,
yes, I'm
so
coming
how
to
did they
that.
become a minority?
Absolutely, I'm coming to that, and I hope we have that much time. So, like when I say that it wasn't कि कुछ ऐसे ही आ रहे अरे पेपर्स में लिख रहे हैं भैया तुम निकलो यहाँ से वरना मार दिए जाओगे हिट लिस्ट बनते थे posters were pasted on walls shops on homes. Now those homes are no longer homes, they are houses. The abduction, rape, mutilation, murder, beastly massacres have happened, yaar. And instead of being a bit remorseful about the inhuman apathy of the state and the society, or being appreciative of the fact that, a community has managed to rebound or get back on its feet without any support per se, or being inspired by our persistent belief in our faith in the nation and in justice. We were told that we've been sitting on it for 27 years. I mean, yeah, this is so inhuman, callous, and dejecting at so many levels that I don't even want to say anything. कुछ बोल दूंगी ना फिर वो contempt of court ना हो जाए भगवान. But you know what I mean and how. So what we experienced, it took 27 years to reach the rest of the country, and that is a shame. Well, social media was really missing in those days, and the fifth pillar of democracy, that is supposed to act as the conscience keeper of the society, was busy gorging on Vazwan fests. Yeah? We had committees comprising of eminent veterans, and I do say it with implicit sarcasm that these eminences were supposed to find facts. Perhaps they did too. But what did the report? I mean, it seemed to mysteriously exclude the plight of Kashmiri Pandits. But having said that, what is gratifying is the recent transparency. There is now willingness, there is some awareness amongst the masses with respect to, they discuss the Islamist nature of the entire so-called political movement in Kashmir. It is no separatism, it is dehumanization, yeah, on account of religious fundamentalism. The world has seen it, it is seen in every day. And as Sunanda Vashisht, the founder of Mindmakers, she said the other day, Kashmir has been an Islamist lab and the world was looking elsewhere. Actually, in Kashmir, this project has been going on for centuries. And before I tell you about exactly how it turned Islamist, there's something that I really want to make sure that reaches out to other people, is that there is a huge history that somehow has not reached the masses. And it is very shocking that it has not. Kashmir has first been mentioned in Patanjali's Mahabhashya as Kashmira. This is in 2nd century BC.
Yes.
Vishwakarma, Patanjali, Abhinav Gupta, Bilhana, Kalhana, Bhama, ये सब eminent scholars हैं यार. वासु गुप्ता, शिवसूत्र जिन्होंने लिखा, मेधातिथि, ये सब कश्मीर से हैं यार. मेधातिथि ने बोला कि भाई सती पाप है, किसी को मारना पाप है. उनका नाम कहीं सुनाई देता है? According to Kalhana, the first known king of Kashmir was Gonanda. I mean, 1000 BC की बात है ये. Gonanda 1000 BC. The native king of Kashmir who minted coins in the early 6th century is Pravarasena. If you read Nilmat Puran, Kushal, and every Hindu, every Indian must, There are verses that say the goddess Uma is the same as Kashmir.
The Kalhana thing is the Rajatarangini, right?
Yes, indeed. Kalhana wrote the history of Kashmir, Raj Tarangini. उन्होंने
Yeah.
लिखी और उसमें अमन उससे पहले की बात कर रही हूँ मैं. तुम नीलमत पुराण में पढ़ो, ये वर्सेस सुनो कुशल, और अगर तुम्हारे आंखों में आंसू ना आए तो I really don't know. But yes, you are a Nireshwarwadi, so I really can't.
Sir, I was like, ये वाला wrong number लग गया.
But this has got nothing to do, trust me, with religion. It is more about culture and civilization. Listen to this, and I would like to really read out these lines. Not dependent on rains, beneficial for all the living beings, devoid of dangers and filled with people, filled with temples that look as graceful as beautiful ladies, devoid of evil beings like serpents, tigers, and bears, filled with people who are fond of drinks, filled with rows of rice fields, fully thriving and endowed with flowers, fruit, and vegetables, filled with Brahmans who are experts of Vedas and adept at yagnas, filled with prosperous Kshatriyas adept at weapons and Shastras, filled with Vaishyas adept at trade, filled with Shudras adept at industry, filled with temples for all the auspicious temples for all the gods, full of supportive men and happy people, full of gardens and groves, filled with music of pleasant musical instruments, thronged with hermitages of sages, and breathtaking in summer and winter, very auspicious, always celebrating festivals, always having the echo of Vedic chants. The entire region of Kashmir is described as a Mahatirtha is Nilmat Puran, yaar. And they said not a single inch of land which is not Tirtha in Kashmir Mandala is what they say. And it is written that I'm naming certain Tirthas which had to be undertaken. So I'm giving you the old names and the new names, and you will realize what I'm trying to drive at. So Ushira Trikutagiri is Vaishno Devi in the Trikuta Hills. Now Bandhana, Kausarnag, Haramukkuta, Harmukh Peak, Nandi Parvata, Lundkul, Bharatagiri, Sopat, Amareshwara, Amarnath, अलीपत्र नागा, विचार नाग, अक्षिपाल नागा, अच्छबल, अनंतनाग, आज भी अनंतनाग बोलते हैं, अब इस्लामाबाद कर दिया है.
हाँ, उसका तो नाम अभी चेंज किया ना ये अब्दुल्ला की गवर्नमेंट ने.
कश्मीरियत ने कर दिया ना नाम चेंज उसका. बहुरूपा बीरू, भद्रकाली, look at the names. भेद देवी, विजयेश्वर is now Vejbror, भूतेश्वरा, चक्रधर तीर्थ, चंद्रसर, देवसर, कपोतेश्वर, कोटि तीर्थ, खंडपुच्च नाग, मानस तीर्थ विच इज मानस बल नाउ जहां पे तुम्हें वुलर लेक वगैरह मिलती है, लोक पुण्य तीर्थ, नारायण स्थान तीर्थ, पंचहस्त, पांडव तीर्थ, पुष्कर, स्वयंभू तीर्थ, राम तीर्थ, सुंदर नाग, तक्षक नाग, जयवन, इसको जेवन बोलते हैं आज, वराह मुल्ला, बारामुल्ला, वशिष्ठ आश्रम, वांगत. Kalhana in Rajatarangini says that how people from the regions, आज के जो modern day India, they would come either for pilgrimage of studies. There were special hostels that were made for scholars of different regions, such as scholars from Haryana, Bengal, UP. So you have Arya Desh, Madhya Desh written there. So यहाँ कश्मीर में बाहर से लोग आते थे पढ़ने, भ्रमण करने, pilgrimage के लिए आते थे. Now coming to the whole thing, Muslim rule started in Kashmir in 1339 with Shah Mir, who came in power. From the 14th century to the early 19th century, people have faced persecution, and this been forced conversion 6 times. So actually, if I were to tell you that शुरू में क्या हुआ था, Shah Mir became the Sultan, then he was succeeded by Jamshid, who tried to destroy the temple at Avantipura. Avantipur के ruins अभी भी हैं. When people go from Jammu to Kashmir, it's on the way. A lot of people, if they have been to Kashmir by road, would know it. So this guy tried to destroy the temple at Avantipura. The locals gave him a thrashing. He fell ill in battle, died, and then he, Alauddin succeeded him. Then you will see other kings, and till the time we also had another king, Shahabuddin. He destroyed the temple in Vijayeshwara, which I just mentioned, the Bij Bihara temple. Then we had Shahabuddin, जिसके टाइम में हमदानी आया, जिसको कि सब लोग सूफी बोलते हैं, सेंट्रल एशिया से बड़ा हमदानी. अरे यार, उसके अगर तुम कार्य सुनोगे, anyways, that is another story. Then the worst period started under Sikandar Butchikan's rule, who was of the Kashmiri dynasty. And it was so bad, the situation, that for over a period of 7 centuries, Hindus had to flee the valley 7 times. Every time a huge chunk of population was killed or converted. And as a result, in the 21st century, only Brahmins were left here, who are now called as Pandits. So Kashmiri Pandits is Kashmiri Hindus only. It is not about the Varna Vyavastha. जब से मैं पैदा हुई, मेरी दादी जी, मेरे पिताजी, उनके पिताजी, we have always been Kashmiri Pandits, because I haven't known the caste system, वर्ण व्यवस्था, जाति प्रथा पता ही नहीं है मुझे. जब हम निकले वहां से 90 में, फिर मैं बाहर गई पढ़ने के लिए, then I realized, oh, what do they mean, Brahman, Pandit, और जिस तरह की connotations, because there's been a whole propaganda against Brahmans and all. So I realized, oh my God, so this is what they believe. That is why they don't even have any empathy for us, because they actually just look at us and just they see Brahman. They don't realize that we are the ones who kept our faith 3 centuries of persecution ke baad. So when we say Kashmiri Pandit, that comes from Kashmiri Bhatt. Bhatt is a scholar, and it's more about being a learned person or a scholar than a priest. Even abhi bhi tum dekhoge, undergraduate is the minimum qualification yaar. इतनी त्रासदी हुई, फिर 1800 इतनी त्रासदी के बाद बीरबल धर जो थे, कश्मीरी पंडित, he went finally to the court of Maharaja Ranjit Singh in 1819, and Ranjit Singh had conquered Multan, rescued it from Afghans, and that probably prompted him to go and seek help. And he then led an armed group of Sikhs into Kashmir, and Sopore mein wo pakde gaye. There was a battle, and Afghans could not even last 5 hours, and they vacated Kashmir. So now when you say कि भैया यहाँ पे Islam spread कैसे हुआ, this was in a nutshell. But there is one important thing that I would like to bring to your notice and to the notice of listeners who choose to listen to our podcast. So I said that Kashmir, Islamic rule began in 1339. But please note that by this time, Alauddin Khilji had already conquered almost the whole of India, which is today Pakistan and Bangladesh. Islamic rule was in Kashmir till 1890. So Kashmir was under Islamic rule only for 480 years. And 95% of Kashmiris now happen to be Muslims. Indo-Gangetic regions में Islamic rule was for more than 800 years, and the Muslim population was just 12%. Now why would be so? ऐसा क्या हो गया कि you get the anomaly. So there is this 480 साल में ही 95% आबादी तब्दील हो गई, चेंज हो गई, and उधर 800 वर्ष के बावजूद भी नहीं चेंज हुआ. So there can't be just one single factor. There are quite a few actually. So Kashmir was a very strong state during the pre-Islamic rule. Maharaja Lalitaditya of Kashmir was one of the few Indian rulers whose territory actually extended beyond which comes under Indian territory aaj ki. So this empire extended until Hindu Kush, and there are foreign travelers जिन्होंने record किया हुआ है, Yunzong and all, Yunzong की यहाँ पे इतना इनका था, expanded kingdoms, and how they ruled. Until the 14th century, no Islamic invader could enter Kashmir, and there was an invasion by Ghazni, which was also repaired. So how did it happen कि 180 degrees हो गया in 5 centuries? There are many reasons. So one is, we can say, the complete breakdown of Kashmiri society. After the Utpala dynasty, Kashmir unfortunately suffered many evil rulers. So a king generally decides everything, and if there is a bad ruler, and if there is a succession of bad, evil, wicked rulers, there is a loss of confidence of people, and there will be a societal breakdown, norms and morals. So it was not easy. तब भी easy नहीं था to subjugate. Kashmiri rulers at that point of time still they believed in what we call the secularism as the Indian Republic practices today. So they let in all sorts of jihadis and Central Asian invaders who poured down in vast numbers, because वहाँ पे Central Asian Muslims were having tough times due to Mongol invasions. So we were all those Atiti Devo Bhava Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, please come. So the Kashmiri kings gave refuge to every scoundrel, pardon my French, from Central Asia. And when an opportunity arose in Kashmir after an invasion in turbulent times, these immigrants seized power. Once in power, they did not launch a frontal attack on Kashmiri Hindu society. All they wanted कि हाँ भाई हम लोग राज करेंगे. They were content with retaining power, and they actually continued the use of Sanskrit as official language. Nowhere else in this world will you find such a precedence in Islamic world that they continued with natives ka language hi raha. But once the murderous Sufis they started pouring into Kashmir, they made it a religious obligation for the Islamist kings to slay kafirs and destroy temples. And I have written a post with my learned friend True Indology on Sufis in Kashmir. There's one particular Sufi, Araki, uska tum padhoge, so you will realize why I really don't like this word Sufism. So these Sufis dealt with people with brute force. There was another group of people who used subtler methods. नंद ऋषि करके बड़े ही पॉपुलर है ऋषि, कश्मीर में बोलते हैं नंद ऋषि. He's even revered by Kashmiri Pandits, and there are other rishis also. Now these Muslim rishis, they retained many external Hindu elements, vegetarianism ho gaya, asceticism, they preached in Kashmiri, they sometimes even used Sanskrit. So what happened, as a result, they were looked upon with respect, not just by Kashmiri Muslims, but by Kashmiri Hindus. Because, they were like, arey, ye to apna hi hai, when you're talking about such things. But these rishis and these Sufis, they exhorted their followers to abandon idols, chant kalima. They wanted their followers to abide by Sharia. And it is these Sufis who actually converted a large number of Kashmiri rural folk. Because वो unsuspecting folks थे. अभी भी देखो कितने लोग जाते हैं दरगाह पे. In fact, the staunch radicals, the Islamists will even destroy certain कोई मज़ार होगी. They do not believe in it. They do not believe that, right? But so the gullible people would keep getting converted like this also. But the most important factor was the persecution by Islamic kings. They were avowed enemies. They adopted radical form of Islam as the official religion. They destroyed idols. They killed Brahmins. And Kushal, you cannot imagine the kind of atrocities. They killed Hindus, Brahmins, and कहा जाता है, history has it that quintals of जनेऊ पड़े होते थे. इतने लोगों को मारा उन्होंने एक साथ. There is a place in Kashmir called Butt Mazar, जहाँ पे डुबो के मारा नदी है कश्मीरी पंडित. They were not allowed to wear shoes. एक टाइप के ये नहीं पहनो. चल रहा होगा को कश्मीरी पंडित, any Muslim could jump onto his shoulders and make him carry him around. अब कश्मीरी पंडित walking, उसके ऊपर filth filled pictures फेंके. I mean, you cannot imagine. And when I listen to all this, I really marvel at the courage and more than that the resolve, because initially, as I told you, yes, they did give these people a tough fight, but over a period of time people converted, people were killed, a lot of people had to flee the valley. The legend has it, किंवदंती है, पता नहीं सत्य है क्या, कि एक समय था जब केवल 11 परिवार रह गए थे कश्मीर में. And even in our calendar देख से Panmas and Malamas, जब Zainul Abidin का थोड़ा period था, better था तो as compared to the other kings. So then he asked some Kashmiri who had left the valley to come back, and so we still have this Banamas and Malamas करके बोलते. I don't want to get into it. So there is that historical proof and cultural evidence that this exodus, it's not exodus, but yes, this persecution happened and people had to run away to save their lives. And so this is exactly, so when we say that how did Kashmir turn from 100% Hindu to a 95% Muslim region, this is because of these multiple factors. That is how it is.
Okay, now that we have established, so now we circle back again to the present period. Now, every day, आजकल ये मतलब वो जैसे सब्जी खरीदने जाते हैं वैसे ये वर्ड ड्रॉपिंग होती है कश्मीरियत. I mean, तो टिंडे खरीदने जा रहे हैं भाई कश्मीरियत, भाई 2 कश्मीरियत दे दो, ऐसा हो गया. मतलब वो वर्ड की कोई वैल्यू मुझे समझ नहीं पड़ती है. सो व्हाट इज कश्मीरियत अकॉर्डिंग टू यू? एंड आई हैव अ स्मॉल follow-up corollary to this. Do you think Kashmiriyat is equal to Haivaaniyat?
A good point. I mean, I thought you would bring it up, and good you did, because recently a lot of Kashmiriyat has been flowing around very lightly, like the Shatu shawl on the ladies, Latvians ladies. Anyway, so you know what, Kushal, actually this word Kashmiriyat na kahin pe attested nahi hai anywhere before 1975. If we look at records, the first attestation comes from an article in Srinagar Times. And what they meant, the word Kashmiriyat was actually used for impure Urdu laden with Kashmiri words used by Kashmir's newspapers. And the author of Srinagar Times actually disapproved of this. So Kashmiriyat, which actually started as an impurity, has now moved to the realm of obnoxiousness. Considering how elite condemning the recent killing of Amarnath Yatris can, for all practical purposes, they can cite it as Kashmiriyat also. So coming back to the whole thing, so after the 1971 war, जब पाकिस्तान को sound thrashing मिला, the pro-freedom elite in Kashmir obviously lost all hope of joining Pakistan. 75 में Sheikh Abdullah signed the Kashmir Accord, and in return for a CM-ship, which was supported by the Congress legislators, and with that, any immediate hopes of a separate nation were also dashed. So this is when the separatists decided to emphasize a separate identity of Kashmiris, which contrasted with India. So the Kashmiri politicians who propagated these mythical ideas of Kashmiriyats are the same ones who you will find them using, and you will find them having used words like Qom and Mulk for Kashmir, just to emphasize that there is a distinct identity from India. And from distinct, I mean separate. So distinct is not really a positive connotation. One could argue that such a concept of Kashmiriyat existed even if the term is of recent usage, but there is no evidence that there is a concept in theory or practice. Okay, to sum it up, all I can say is that it is Kashmiriyat that has turned Anantnag into Islamabad. The land of infinite springs is now the land of infinite sins against humanity. So yes, of late, whatever we've been seeing, we can use the definition that you just chose to give of Kashmir. That is all I would like to say about it.
तो ये कश्मीरियत में माइनॉरिटी का क्या रोल है, और ऑल्सो व्हाट अबाउट अ फीमेल इन सच अ ब्यूटिफुल कश्मीरियत?
Okay, well, Kushal, see, I might be laughing things, but sometimes it is easier to laugh things away than to allow it all to come back and really depress you. I mean, I have lived through that. I told you I was a preteen, and I choose to look at it as a learning experience, because that is what I am, then that is who I am, a proud Indian Hindu. I learned from my parents and from my elders how to actually grow from adversity. Kushal, there was a time I had a wonderful childhood, and I will talk about minority at length, but let me just give you my example. I had a really wonderful, privileged childhood in Srinagar, Kashmir, and my dad worked in a good place, and we stayed close to that place. Not sharing details, of course, for obvious reasons. So the thing is that I had a lovely, luxurious childhood. I had a whole room to myself, yeah, with my one cupboard dedicated to books, with shelves for comics. You get the scene, I'm not trying to brag.
Yeah.
And then suddenly, this child moves from Kashmir, where the highest temperature she might have witnessed was in 30s. And I remember vividly, ये मेरी memory है, that one day in Srinagar, I told mama कि mama बहुत गर्मी हो रही है आज तो, and she said बेटा fan 3 पे रख दो. Do you get it? So fan 3 पे रख दो was बहुत गर्मी हो रही in Kashmir, and suddenly I am in Jammu. Luckily, my granddad had a 3-room place in which 17 of us lived for months together. I was a fortunate Kashmiri Pandit. I'm being very honest. 17 people in 3 rooms. I call myself fortunate. 1 washroom, water supply intermittent, electricity supply, can't even tell you. It's not that I hadn't been to Jammu. My dada dadi were in Jammu, and we used to go in winter vacations. Ka period hota tha Jammu. So 3 months mein, when the valley is covered with snow, it's very cold. So we would go and be with them. The kids would go with them, and we would have a nice time. So all I knew of Jammu was like हल्की सी गर्मी का मौसम है, हल्की गर्मी in January. मूंगफलियाँ खाओ, रेवड़ियाँ खाओ, लोहड़ी मनाओ, वो सब कुछ. So we were exposed to Dogra culture. We had Dogra neighbors. But we were just 1 महीना है, 2 महीना है, वापस चला गया. But suddenly January came and went, February came and went, and January it came with trauma. And my parents were there when 19th January. My family was there when that whole thing happened. I don't want to talk about it. I think Ashish did talk about it though. So suddenly I am here in this place. I don't know which school I'm going to. I had just moved to the next class, and here my parents didn't know ना salary कहाँ से आएगी. And I was a kid. I had no idea about all this यार. It's just that मैं यहाँ हूँ और अब हम वापस घर नहीं जा रहे. क्यों नहीं जा रहे? सुन रहे हैं थोड़ा थोड़ा भम धमाके हो रहे. ये मर गया. लसकोल जी के साथ ऐसा हुआ. मतलब all these, and Kashmiri community is very small. The Pandit community is very small. So everybody is related to everybody else. Somebody getting killed is my Dadi ji's cousin, and you know what I mean. So I would have met that gentleman, but as a child you don't remember, but it registers somewhere. And then for months it was like, school कहाँ जाना है, क्या करना है, उस घर में पानी. When finally school में मेरा admission हुआ, कुशल मुझे 3 बजे रात को उठना पड़ता था नहाने के लिए, क्योंकि इतने बच्चे थे और मेरे सिर्फ दादाजी कमाऊ थे. He was the only one who was working at that point of time, imagine. And 3 बजे मुझे याद है मम्मा मुझे उठाती थी. And then April, May, June, and the weather in Jammu is extreme, like Delhi. So temperature can go to 47. Can you imagine somebody who has a different skin tone, skin type, a different overall physiology, anatomy, adapted to a cold climate, Now being here where loo क्या होती है, for me loo was just washroom, not that garam hawa जो चलता है.
That's true. I'm sorry. I had to laugh because
Please feel free to laugh, Kushal. It's my life now. When I retrospectively look back at, I can afford to laugh. But when I was growing up, it wasn't. You know what? Mera childhood, if we look at it, ऊपर से peremptorily, is the same as any other kid growing in 80s and 90s. No.
no, but I want to add something over here. Look, if you keep, if you don't laugh, I think they win.
Yes. Do you realize? I mean, we'll come to that. I mean, currently, if you look at people never paid attention to what was happening. So coming back, let me just continue with the migrant thing. So the minority thing in when we came to Jammu. So finally, somehow, government decided that central schools, mein the Kashmiri Pandit kids will get admission. And central school, government school. I had been studying in a normal, nice private school in Srinagar, and I felt कि सरकारी स्कूल में जाऊंगी, मुझे वो below dignity लग रहा था. Kids care. Do you understand what has happened? I've lost everything, and now I've been forced to go to school, and that was in second shift. Bombay में it's common and cool for kids to study, go in various shifts in schools because of the scarcity of space. So एक building है, linear है, सुबह छोटे बच्चों को बाद में भेजते आने के लिए, बोलते आने के लिए. बट इन जम्मू वी वर द ओनली वन. सेकेंड शिफ्ट में जा रहे हैं, तो 12:30 की तपती लू से लेके 6 बजे तक मेरा स्कूल चल रहा है, मैं पैदल जा रही हूँ. यू हैव नो आइडिया कुशल व्हाट इट वाज. एंड आई टोल्ड यू, कैसा घर, फिर किराए का घर हर साल. और इट्स and imagine, like I won't even begrudge Jammuites. Suddenly they had a load of people coming on claiming a part of resources. तो इनिशियल तो एनिमोसिटी थी बिकॉज दे डिडंट इवन रियलाइज, दे डिडंट लुक एट इट एज हिंदूज को निकाला गया है, क्या हो गया, इस्लामिस्ट ने, कुछ और ही था तब का. जब तक कि वो समझे कि क्या हो गया. अब 27 साल हो गए, अब कश्मीरी पंडित्स और डोगरास आर completely like brethren. Many of my best friends are from there. But initially वो 1-2 साल में बहुत ऊपर नीचे था because limited resources थे. And we will talk about Jammu and the stepmotherly treatment towards Jammu later, and you will realize why it must have been a pain for those people also. And I was just growing, suddenly एक नया environment. It was bad, but I'm just glad that my parents are the kind of people that they are, resilient, full of resolve, and they made us focus on what is important. And at that point of time, I discovered writing. I mean, I have been writing since the age of 10, Kushal, and my first poem was on Rose. And I've just gone through my earlier diaries. I'm doing something on Kashmir, so I was looking through my past writing, and each phase that I went through, I have put in a poem, and those were published in papers. So probably वो मेरे अंदर जो angst था, anxiety थी, दुख था, depression था, that went out or got channelized through writing. I have written a poem which was entitled "Oh Us Kashmiris." That was me in 1990 writing a poem, "Oh Us Kashmiris." It was published in the local daily Kashmir Times. They changed the title to "Plight of Migrants." When it came in the paper, I was like, क्यों नहीं मेरी poem छपाई? जब पढ़ा मैंने कहा नहीं, नाम तो मेरा ही, तो they have changed "Oh Us Kashmiris" to "Plight of Migrants." Oh, we are migrants, So अपने देश में मेरे को एक मिल गई लकब कि मैं migrant हूँ.
I just want to add something over here for the listeners. We will never ever get what it is to be a minority. I'm repeating this, but I'm repeating it for a reason. In my podcast with Ashish, I mentioned the same thing. There are very few Hindus who live in India who actually understand the minority syndrome. They don't understand it. Within Hindus, I'm talking about. And Pandits are the only ones who can actually speak about it. So, sorry to butt in. So, go ahead.
I just wanted to tell you something. I mean, let's just step away for once and let's just actually look at minority and Kashmir. I want to tell you one thing, that the word minority does not exist in the constitution of Kashmir, okay? But Kashmiri Muslims still avail religion-based reservation, not citing the constitution of Kashmir. But they cite Articles 1435 of Indian Constitution. So the people's representatives of Kashmir who indulge in perpetual fear-mongering that Article 370 would be abolished and Indian Constitution will be forced upon Kashmiri Muslims, they have no problems with the fact that, they use the same Constitution whenever it's convenient. So one more thing I want to tell you. Let us see Kashmir mein from 1950 to 1980 when alleged Kashmiriyat was in full swing, tab kya tha? The rest of India implemented policies that took away land from rich zamindars, we all know. the zameen, and who did not till the land, and they handed over the land to the tiller. Correct, land to the tiller. Everybody knows. So this was Indian version of socialism. Now look at the Kashmiriyat version of socialism. In the Kashmiriyat version of socialism, any land that the Kashmiri Pandit zamindars owned was taken over by the government and distributed. But Kashmiri Muslim lands were left untouched. Hanji. तो ये था socialism by Abdullah ji and अपने चाचा. I don't know who made him चाचा. And in Kashmir, the Articles 1435 of Indian Constitution, which provided for reservation for backward classes, usko totally they subverted. And what they did is Kashmiri Muslims were classified as backward classes, and Hindus were classified as forward classes. So blatant religious discrimination, it ignored the basic fact that in Kashmiri Muslim community, there were powerful religious and feudal families that owned much power and land for the past so many centuries. Damara, Magre chiefs jo bhi the, they were powerful. So even these people were classified as backward classes, and economically poor rural Kashmiri Pandits, or those Pandits who earned their livelihood as priests, etc., they became forward classes. So now you see Kashmiriyat and 370 इतना problem कर गया है कश्मीरी पे इतना. So this is what is the minority का treatment, and this is what they have been doing. I wanted to talk about it because people keep saying 370, 370. I thought I should bring it to light.
So I think Kashmiriyat is basically closeted Shariat.
Oh yeah, you said it. Actually, yes, I would basically tell you, not just Kashmiriyat is closeted Shariat. एक important चीज़ है, you will see these people always clinging to Article 370. I will tell you that 370, in my opinion, is an Islamist project to appropriate the larger territory of Hindu Jammu and Buddhist Ladakh. They want that these people should stay as second-class citizens, and therefore you will see now nobody will say Kashmir ki azadi, Jammu Kashmir, Jammu Kashmir. I mean, why else do you think कि 2 लाख से ज़्यादा लोगों को shunt out कर दिया कश्मीर से? They don't want Hindus there, yaar. Forget what the tunes they are singing now. There are other compulsions. But if you see what was happening in all these years, gradually वो ethnic cleansing तो यही हुई ना. It's not closeted Shariat, Kushal. It is Shariat in the open.
Okay, now I want to ask you 2 questions because we have to cover a lot of areas because it's quite a detailed subject. So, a lot of times this word is dropped on Twitter, Panun Kashmir. And I want to connect this to another subject. You just mentioned about how Jammu and Kashmir को club किया जाता है. In fact, if I remember last year, नितिन गडकरी ने बोला था कि कश्मीर, जम्मू और लद्दाख को 3 parts में divide कर देना चाहिए. So, what is your take on both these things? First of all, I want you to tell what Panun Kashmir is, and then what do you think about the trifurcation of Kashmir?
Okay, so see, the thing is that Panun Kashmir is a Kashmiri word, means Apna Kashmir, and I'm not talking about the Panun Kashmiri movement or the body. I'm not a part of it, but I'm just talking about the concept. So Panun Kashmiri, Apna Kashmir, what is the need for that? There are still Kashmiri Pandits who are living in camps, and they are living in deplorable conditions. And if you see, they are the most deprived section of the Kashmiri Hindu society. They are a religious minority, they are an economic minority. Where will they all go? There are a lot of houses in Kashmir belonging to Kashmiri Pandits, but obviously uninhabited and desolate. So if situation would have been safe, if things would not have been as they are, these people could have gone back and lived in those abundant houses. But the fact that they choose not to go shows how difficult it is to live in Kashmir for any Hindu. So they are choosing to live in these dilapidated structures and not in proper houses, because we know what awaits there. Brutal torture has been happening, keeps on happening, and even army ke bina wahan pe, the Indian state has had to put army there to create some semblance of order. So essentially, when we say Panun Kashmir, or when this concept is talked about, it's basically a territory where few colonies for Kashmiri Pandits could be built, because we know that the separatists don't want them to be back, and it's a fact. Whenever there's any talk by the central government or even the state government ever says Kashmiri Pandits ko wapas laenge, you will have all these pillars and separatists saying, no, why separate colony? Let them mix. Arey mix reh ke kya you want to kill the remaining ones also? So essentially, what we mean is that a small chunk of land in in a portion in Kashmir, and probably there is a lot of Kashmiri Pandit land which is in Kashmir. Trade it for that territory and let these people get settled. So it's a kind of a settlement wherein the writ of the state of India runs and not the Kashmiri fundamentalists and their terror mob stay. So it's essentially carving a separate territory is what they are looking at, where the Kashmiri Pandits can live at least in peace and without under the sword of terror. And coming to your other question, yes, you spoke about what Gadkari ji said and trifurcation. See, I am no legal luminary. I'm just talking as a common citizen. This is what I have observed. देखो पहले तो we did not have states created on linguistic basis. Chacha ji believed that if states are divided on that basis, they will be legal chauvinism, and basically he just wanted a very strong union to exercise his own powers. So, and actually a large state is easy to govern, but there are chances that local issues can get sidelined. So you would know, and a lot of listeners might know, that in 1956, AP and TN were a part of single state of Madras. So उस time पे we had one gentleman named Potti Sri Ramalu who went on a fast unto death against imposition of Tamil on Telugu, the language. So that is when Nehru ji implemented a bill by which states could be divided on linguistic basis, and now even if you see, now all states have their own language. और not only that, अभी तुम एक सेम लिंग्विस्टिक स्टेट को तेलंगाना और आंध्रा में डिवाइड किया गया. We have Maharashtra and Gujarat. So actually what I want to say is that hardly there is any state which has not been created on linguistic basis. Now let's look at J&K. Dogras are 35%, Ladakhis 18%. ये लोग बोलते नहीं हैं डोगरी ऑफिशियल लैंग्वेज, ये लोग बोलते नहीं है उर्दू, पर ऑफिशियल लैंग्वेज है उर्दू. कश्मीर की एक्चुअल लैंग्वेज उर्दू नहीं है, but still Urdu is the official language. So essentially what is happening, the Dogras and the Ladakhis, whose native language is not Urdu, the language of Urdu is being imposed on them. That is language imposition. And the thing is that Article 370, it is 370 which is preventing, those decisions of linguistic division from impacting the state. So we cannot have a Jammu state right now on a linguistic basis. See, important thing is Dogri is not a recent thing. It is an old language. Inscriptions बहुत पुराने सालों के हैं. But it is not taught in schools. In fact, I don't think even Kashmiri is taught in schools in Kashmir. And well, I don't want to comment on it. They're actually killing their own language in Kashmir. They think that ये काफिरों की गवार language है, but that's their wish. But why kill Dogri? Dogri script Takri, it was active till 1947, but you hardly find it. Nobody can read Takri. Isn't this cultural genocide? Jammuites used Devanagari for writing Dogri, whosoever writes. So like Sharda was killed, Takri got killed too. And the funny part is Sharda script जो है, it is 600 years older than the Nashnadik script which is used. Even now Kashmir में जो भी लोग थोड़ा बहुत कश्मीरी लिखते पढ़ते हैं वो Nashnadik use करते हैं. So funny part is even in Kashmir till 1947 Urdu was not even used. The official language of the state, as I told you earlier, was Sanskrit till 1450. Then Persian was there from 1450 to 1819, and even in Sikh rule it got continued. Then Takri was introduced under the Dogra rule and it lasted till 1947. So the funny part is, how is it that Urdu became the official language of J&K? It became the official language. I mean, that was a rhetorical question that I posted actually. But it became the official language when it became the official language of Pakistan. And the funny part is, even in Pakistan, majority of population was non-Urdu speaking. And how did that happen? Because the Urdu speaking ulema of Mufti who were behind the Muslim League, Pakistan, behind the Islamization of Kashmir, these are the people who pushed the Pakistan का official language Urdu है. And जो हमारे Islamists थे J&K, now they are also, all praise for Urdu. There are jobs in the government which require proficiency in Urdu, and Urdu does not come naturally to the people of Jammu and Ladakh. So that is actually open discrimination. So a state will only make sense if everybody goes together. Who wants indiscriminate division? I mean, किसको चाहिए यार? Large states can be governed better. But these disparities are going to hurt people. They are going to hurt their prospects for growth, their future. I mean, you make a Dogra follow Urdu and a Ladakhi follow Urdu. That is actual language imposition, not writing a signage in Hindi as the third language, whatever. I mean, there are thousands of state and central government funded schools throughout J&K. I don't know what is being spent on Sharda or Takri. Trust me. Telangana में 12% Muslims हैं. Urdu is official language plus first language along with Telugu. 28% Hindus हैं JK में. Dogri कहीं नहीं use हो रही. क्यों नहीं? Jammu contributes around 75% टू जे एंड के जीडीपी। 3 गुना टैक्स देता है जम्मू और 3 गुना एक्सपेंडिचर लेता है कश्मीर। एज कंपनी आती
Well,
है जम्मू में, नो सीरियसली, प्राइवेट कंपनीज विल नॉट सेट शॉप इन जम्मू बिकॉज इट इज जे एंड के एंड देयर इज डिसरप्शन एंड वायलेंस एंड किलिंग इन कश्मीर रीजन, और उसकी वजह से लोग जम्मू में नहीं आते। नाउ टेल मी वन थिंग, इतने सालों में कोई भी सीएम क्यों नहीं है जम्मू रीजन? पॉलिसीज कौन बनाता है? कश्मीर के इलेक्टेड पॉलिटिशियंस, कश्मीर का सीएम, ही विल मेक पॉलिसीज। फॉर एग्जांपल, नाउ यू लुक एट दीस 6,000 Rohingyas have been put in Jammu. Now do these people of Jammu want alien immigrants? No, yeah. I want to make another point here. Jammu is culturally
bolo.
similar to, can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah.
So Jammu is culturally similar to Azad Kashmir and West Pakistan. Just that वो उल्टे साइड है, सियालकोट, मीरपुर, like my दादी would say मेरी मीरपुर की सिलाई होती थी, and also I remember मीरपुर from that point. So once it was conquered by the Paki army, Hindus वहां से रिफ्यूजी बन के आए। अभी तक 1.5 लाख लोगों को डोमिसाइल स्टेटस नहीं मिला है, वोटिंग राइट्स नहीं है, जबकि मीरपुरी डोगरा एंड अ डोगरा ऑफ जम्मू, they are as same or different as a Kashmiri from Baramulla and say Sopore. So government of J&K is unable to provide domicile to these people, but it has settled down alien immigrants in Jammu region. Who wants these alien immigrants? Kashmir ka CM. So had Jammu been independent of Kashmir, Jammu would not have allowed this to happen actually. It would have ensured that those 1.5 lakh people do get all rights that they deserve. I mean, they are as Indian as anybody else. And see, basically, people might say that Jammu, if it becomes a state, it will be a very small state. But then we have Sikkim, we have Delhi, and there are small states. And with that, I would like to rest my case with regard to the trifurcation bit. Actually, obviously, for obvious reasons, this whole topic, the subject, everything is very close to my life, and I might be a little passionate and getting carried away, Kushal. So you have to rein me in and bring me back to the current state.
That's okay. There is no need to rein anyone in because, and I repeat it again, nobody can understand the pain. जिसके साथ होता है उसी को पता चलता है, जिस पर बीतती है वही जानता है. और as Indians or fellow Indians, we can only empathize and sympathize, but we really don't know what you guys have gone through. And I mean, we know each other for a while now, and I've always, whenever there are some arguments, I always tell people that sometimes you got to understand that the Kashmiri Pandit psyche will be a little different. But anyways, now I want to go to a completely different topic. Let's talk about your book. So your book is called Soul Call of Love and More, a tribute to Elizabeth Barrett Browning. Now, why did you write this book? Tell me that.
Okay, so are you interested in the whole story or the summary?
अभी समरी बताओ. अभी ऑलरेडी हम लोग 50 मिनट टच कर चुके हैं.
Sure, I'm sure. So actually, Kushal, as I told you that I've been writing since the age of 10, okay? And I've been reading since I was 4. And I would read across genres, anything. मतलब मैं तो ये भी बोलती हूँ, it's a joke कि सींगदाना जिस कवर में आता है वो भी पढ़ सकती हूँ. The written word has a tremendous amount of appeal for me, and nothing was taboo, and I was encouraged to read by my parents. So Jammu ke ek library, obviously we couldn't afford books, so I would go there. The librarian would, he knew me and I knew all the books there actually. So the thing is that I've been writing, and once as a teenager I chanced upon a poem by Elizabeth Barrett Browning, who's the poet Robert Browning's wife, and I read this poem. It was entitled How Do I Love Thee? So Elizabeth Barrett Browning actually is one of the more phenomenal poets as we now call them. And she battled illness. She battled a very different patriarchal society. She fell in love with Robert Browning and went against her parents as an invalid, eloped with him, had an amazing life, kept penning poems and books, and she actually is as regarded as Wordsworth is. And when I read How Do I Love Thee, I loved the first person narration style, and I liked that she had used very light, easy words to actually communicate something very profound. And see, at that point of time, I told you I was writing about plight of migrants and poems like that because what I was going through. But I had this in mind that क्या कभी ऐसा होगा कि मैं ऐसी poems लिखूंगी? Probably. And when I read about her, I got more and more interested in her whole persona. And I promised to myself that maybe one day I will at least write 10 love poems in her style only, like she writes in a very different style, very light, easy words, not to show कि भाई मेरा बड़ा flowery vocab है, नहीं. The sentiment is profound, the words are very light and easy. Early this year, actually in January, I met with a near fatal accident, and yes, I'm fine now. And I was laid down in bed for 65 days and quite immobilized. You have seen me, so you know. So when I went towards the end, I was like, oh, I've been here and I haven't done anything. So uh, it can't be just like, कि मैं बस मेरा एक्सीडेंट हुआ, मरते मरते बची, हेलो यमराज को बोला, वापस आई, ठीक हो गई, फिर वही जिंदगी. कुछ तो मैंने देखा, सीखा, और suddenly I was like, and the kind of love I got from all quarters, obviously my family, friends, colleagues, everybody, and over a period of time, even when we were going through the whole tumult, I realized that love, uh, as a frequency, as a vibration, as an expression, as an emotion, is tremendous. And if you have love in your heart, you can actually move mountains. And when I say love, Kushal, it is not the typical male female love जो हम बोलते हैं, लैला मजनू, हीर रांझा सोहनी महिवाल. Love can be for anything. You can be in a love with a book, a person, an animal, a style, the weather. And if you observe deeply, there is a cycle that happens. You approach something, it attracts you. You get to know that thing, that style, that circumstance, that person. Probably you appreciate it more and you are closer, or you get disenchanted, you withdraw. But again, in that entire journey, there's a learning. So while I was there on my bed, I was like, can I just do something about this? I read my post and I was like, oh, I have promised myself these points. Let me just look back and see what I have actually managed to do. And I saw that I had written quite a few love poems. And then बैठे मैंने और भी लिखी. And a friend of mine, Sai Swarupa Iyer, I mean, she's written the wonderful Abhay. She said, why are you even waiting for a publisher? Please, this is a digital world, digital India hai, so you have to be a digital author. Go to Kindle and do it. And I just went for a lark and I put it forth. But the kind of responses and reviews that I got from, strangers, a lot of my known people also read it, but for them it was quite a different kind of writing from me, because all this while I had been writing columns on secularism and Kashmiri massacres of Kashmiri Pandits, and about topical societal political topics, and love was very different. So one gentleman even came up to me and said, oh, I was surprised that you would write something like this. So essentially this poems anthology is my dedication to Elizabeth Barrett Browning. It is a collection of poems on love, but essentially I am talking about the cycle that one experiences, and the love that I'm talking about is very different from the regular romantic love that one would see. It's not that you will not find traces of that here, but the love that I talk about is between any two individuals, दो दोस्तों के बीच में, colleague के बीच में, किसी के बीच में, randomly, as I told you, even a style, the weather, anything. And it actually was very cathartic for me, and it's my good fortune that the Indic Book Club saw merit in the book, and they came forth and they volunteered to do the book release of the hard copy. And it was very recently, the book release happened in India Habitat Center by the very venerable erudite Professor Makar and Paranjpe, and that was my good fortune. And the entire amount that's been collected, or that has been collected and that will be collected from the sale of this poem's anthology, goes to the Indic Book Club and Indic Academy as my gratitude to them. So yes, that's the story in a nutshell.
Okay, before I request you to read one poem, and you have to read the one that I like, you have no option.
All right.
So again, this is for the listeners. Buy her book.
Yes, please do. You will love these, I guarantee. Or I'll write more poems for you if you don't like those.
शर्म किया करो, कभी कभी बुक भी पढ़ा करो और खरीद के पढ़ा करो.
Yes, please.
So now, and when I read the poems, I immediately messaged you on Twitter, and I had told you that I really liked Mirage. So can you read out that poem for the listeners?
Okay, so this poem is entitled Mirage, as Kushal just informed all of us. My appearance affects you, my mind does not. My words impress you, my thoughts do not. My company relieves you, my friendship does not. My indifference invigorates you, my affection does not. It is a mirage you are after, that you ever grasp cannot. Thank you, Kushal. That was for you.
And thanks a lot. Actually, I couldn't have ended this podcast on a better note. And I had decided that I wanted to end the podcast after this, after you recite this poem. So, once again, thanks a lot for doing this.
It was my
And
absolute pleasure, Kushal.
and to the listeners, once again, I'm going to leave the link to her book on the description of the podcast. Please buy it, because the more we buy books, the more we read books, the more we encourage writers to write new material, and then we create an ecosystem. So it's not about me. See, I'm a voracious reader, so I probably end up reading 50 to 60 books a year. But what I'm trying to do via this podcast is I'm going to try to talk to different authors who cover different subjects so that we develop a culture of reading. We need new authors, we need new voices. So, on that note, once again, thanks, Dimple. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you so much, Kushal, and thank you everybody whosoever listens to it. Please spread the message, and yes, do buy my book. Have they deployed this? They have put these people in Jammu.